Hello, and welcome to Same Crime, Different Time. I'm Jennifer Chambers. You know that I'm passionate about uncovering the truth. Here, we're taking that passion to the dark heart of the Pacific Northwest. As a true crime and historical writer, I've spent years immersed in the chilling archives of this region. Each week, we'll explore cases, both ancient and modern, of murder, unexplained events, strange places, and those who have simply vanished. We'll dig into the research, connecting the dots between past and present, revealing the threads of mystery that weave through our incredible, yet often unsettling, landscape. Prepare to be captivated as we discover that while times may change, the darkest aspects of human nature remain hauntingly the same. It was the day after Thanksgiving in 1989. In the small rural community of Acme, Washington, 18-year-old Mandy Stavik laced up her running shoes and stepped outside. She was home from college for the holiday. Her dog ran beside her. The air was cold. The roads were quiet. She went for a jog along Strand Road. Her dog came home that day, and she didn't. For nearly 30 years, the question haunted this small corner of Washington state. Who killed Mandy Stavik? This is Same Crime, Different Time, and I'm Jen Chambers. Today's story is about a murder that sat unsolved for nearly 3 decades until science, persistence, and one observant coworker finally uncovered the truth. Part 1. The girl everyone knew. Acme, Washington, sits east of Bellingham, Washington, in Whatcom County. The area is surrounded by farmland and green forests and the winding South Fork of the Nooksack River. So, pretty typical town in the Northwest. Mandy Stavik was exactly the kind of young woman, small town young woman, that a small town rallies around. Acme in 1989 was exactly the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked. It was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody else. Mandy had just graduated from Mount Baker High School earlier that year. Now, she had been an athlete. She played basketball, she ran track, and she was an honor student. She loved languages and music. Her friends talked about her as a really smart person, a very kind person, a person with lots of energy. And in fall of '89, she began attending Central Washington University. But on November 24th, 1989, the day after Thanksgiving, she was home visiting family. So at about 1:50 that afternoon, Mandy left. Her house was also on Strand Road, and she left to go for a jog with the family dog. She ran these quiet roads that she had run on and known since childhood. Hours passed, and then the dog returned home alone, without Mandy. Part 2. A community in shock. When Mandy didn't return, her family and neighbors began searching immediately, of course. And pretty soon, the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office joined the search. But 3 days later, their worst fears were realized. Mandy's body was discovered in the South Fork of the Nooksack River, about 3 miles from her home. She had been abducted and sexually assaulted, and she'd been drowned. Investigators at the time believed that she might have been unconscious when she entered the water because she had an injury to the back of her head, but they couldn't be sure. Of course, the crime devastated that small community. In a place like that, where violent crime was rare, the idea that somebody had kidnapped and murdered a young woman during a daytime jog was more than terrifying. So, of course, they questioned hundreds and hundreds of people, and there were thousands of tips that they investigated. But despite all of those efforts and the intensity of the search for her, the case stalled out. It's easy to forget that the technologies we have now didn't exist then, even in 1989. So slowly, the years began to pass, and the case kind of got dropped. remained open, but there was nothing new to investigate. Part 3, the case goes cold. The investigators did preserve an important piece of evidence from the crime scene. They knew to preserve the DNA at the time. But in 1989, right, forensic technology was still developing. It was super new. So the DNA profile was entered into the databases, but it didn't match anyone. Detectives continuing following those leads and little crumbs to find her killer for decades. According to the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office, there were literally hundreds of suspects to investigate. And they pursued all kinds of leads all over the United States and even internationally, but still nothing stuck. And for Mandy's family, the years became decades. Birthdays and holidays, everything passed. But the question remained, who did this? Then, in the early 2010s, the investigation took a new turn. Part 4, a suspect emerges. So investigators began reviewing the case with this modern DNA analysis and different investigative strategies that you couldn't even conceive of in 1989. And one name kept surfacing. That name was Timothy Forrest Bass. Bass had lived just down the road from Mandy's family on Strand Road in 1989. In fact, Mandy's regular jogging route took her directly past his house. Investigators asked him to provide a voluntary DNA sample, but he refused. Of course, that refusal didn't prove anything at the time. It did raise suspicion. So, kind of like a movie script, detectives began to watch him, quietly and patiently. Part 5, the soda can. So, in 2017, police were conducting surveillance on Bass. And they were looking for any little crack in his demeanor, something that they could use. But the break in the case didn't come from the detectives' careful work. It came from a coworker. So Bass worked as a delivery driver for a place called Franz Bakery. Franz Bakery is a pretty big bakery up here in the Northwest. I've actually visited their factory when I was a kid. It's got a very familiar big white truck with gingham. So he was a delivery driver for them. One of his co-workers there at Franz learned that he was a suspect in the Mandy Stavik case. She later said that she felt like she had to help. It was a moral obligation for her to do what she could. So one day at work, she watched him finish a drink. He threw away a plastic cup and a Coca-Cola can. And this Good Samaritan retrieved them safely from the trash and turned them over to investigators. Inside that piece of discarded trash was the DNA that detectives had waited nearly 30 years to obtain. The Washington State Patrol Crime Laboratory tested everything, and the result was that a DNA matched evidence collected from Mandy Stavik's body. The statistical probability of the match was, quote, 1 in 11 quadrillion, unquote. So in December 2017, Timothy Bass was arrested. Part 6, the trial. So, Timothy Bass was charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping and sexual assault. The trial didn't happen until 2019. But during the trial, the prosecution relied pretty hard on the DNA evidence, right, which linked him to the crime. He said that he had consensual sex with Mandy, but the investigators didn't find any sort of evidence or corroboration that the two had ever had a relationship of any kind. And the timeline of the crime contradicted what he said. So on May 24th, 2019, the jury reached its verdict of guilty. Timothy Bass was sentenced to nearly 27 years in prison, nearly 3 decades after Mandy Stavik was murdered. Justice finally came. Cold cases like this are often stories about time, evidence that's waiting, and families that are waiting, and communities that just want to know the answer. But the Mandy Stavik case is also a story about persistence. These detectives never stopped working the case. Advances in forensic science keep happening, and one ordinary citizen picked up a soda can. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive quickly, right? Sometimes it takes 30 years, but sometimes it still arrives. Mandy Stavik was 18 years old. She was a daughter, she was a friend, she was a college freshman with her whole life ahead of her. And today her case stands. It's a reminder that even decades-old crimes can still be solved. Because someone remembers, and someone keeps looking, and someone keeps asking what really happened. It's nice to have a case that has a solution. I feel like often we talk about cases that don't get answers for families and friends. This has been Same Crime, Different Time, and I'm Jen Chambers. I'll see you next time in another place, another era, but the same kind of crime. Take care of yourselves.
Thanks for listening today. Please review and rate wherever you listen to podcasts. That really helps out the show. And please leave us a voicemail at the Spotify link. Also, you can always feel free to send us an email at scdtmail@gmail.com or www.jennifer-chambers.com.